topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in today. I am Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com in addition to Facebook, and that's at Winning Business Radio, as well as available in podcast after the live show on lots of platforms, including YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, and pretty much wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. The mission of the show, Winning Business Radio and TV, as most of you know that are regular listeners, it's to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, right? To learn best practices, the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged and certainly to be inspired by the successes of others. But, you know, virtually every successful person I've ever talked to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So listen, while we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, you hear me say every week, I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. Today, my guest is Chris Hallinan, Director of IoT Sales, accomplished author, speaker, instructor, pilot, and he's my brother. This is a special treat for me. Here's his bio. Chris Hallinan has over 25 years of progressive technical and commercial experience in high-tech companies. He spent his early years in product development, first as a hardware engineer and then in firmware and software development. Chris has developed a blend of startup and corporate cultures, is a recognized team player, team builder, and team leader. Chris has been involved in the open source ecosystem for 2 decades, selling and supporting open source solutions. He's currently Director of IoT Sales for a global producer of Linux operating systems for desktop, server, cloud, and IoT applications. He's an accomplished author, speaker, and instructor. He's the author of at least three books, including the popular embedded Linux book, Embedded Linux Primer. He's a private pilot, instrument rated, and currently owns, flies, and maintains a 1964 Beechcraft Bonanza. He's an accomplished guitar player, is a longtime ham radio operator, is a veteran of the U.S. Army, and grew up in Medfield, Massachusetts. What a coincidence. He has 4 grown children and 4 grandchildren. I'm only at 1 and 2/3. He has 1 brother, me, and we have 2 sisters. Chris, welcome to Winning Business TV and Radio, and thanks for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks for that great introduction. I'm not really that great, but I am the older brother. So pleased to be here. Pleased to be in Massachusetts, actually, and looking forward to some family time this week. So,
sure. So this is a treat for me. When I knew you were coming, obviously you know this story, but the audience doesn't. I said, hey, I got to get you on the radio. So on TV now and radio, keep saying that, but we are simulcast all over the place where it's a worldwide audience, so kind of fun. So you grew up in Medfield, Mass. I'm going to let you tell people in the audience, and many of whom are not in Massachusetts, don't know what that's like. Tell us about that upbringing.
What's that like? Well, I do cherish the fact that we grew up in a small neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. I mean, our parents knew our friends' parents, and it was a different time, right? We could stay out after dark and nobody worried. We could go to our friend's house and our parents knew knew the parents, and just a very different time, right? And I miss that. I cherish that. That upbringing. We had a lot of fun as kids, and it was a small school. My graduation class, I think, was 175 kids in high school. So small town, small school. It's not so small anymore. I hardly recognize the place, but
I know.
But I really, I consider that one of the blessings of my life.
So I know the answer to this question, but the audience doesn't. What were your early interests?
Oh gosh, I was a geek way back, right? I started playing guitar when I was 11. We were on vacation in Connecticut, and one of the babysitters had a guitar, and it's like, hey, I want to try that out, right? So I've been hacking around at the guitar. I'm not a professional guitar player, for that long. But also, as Kevin knows, I was drawn to geeky stuff, tech stuff at a very early age. And I had my ham radio license, my first amateur radio license at the age of 13. And you actually have to pass a test on basic electronics theory. And back in those days, you had to pass a test on proficient resending and receiving Morse code. And I remember I took a class in a Boy Scout camp. We were down the Cape somewhere. I don't remember where, but I took a signaling merit badge, and I chose Morse code, and I kind of learned Morse code the back doorway through that. But it has turned out to be a lifelong passion. I still enjoy, and I can sit here and have this conversation with you in Morse code without pen and paper in my head at 30 words a minute. 30 words a minute to you would sound like just a buzz, right? So yeah, I've been tinkering with electronics and devices since that early age.
What many people may not realize is being an extra class radio operator you weren't 13 as an extra, but you got your extra
16
pretty quick. That's still really young for an extra class. Most of those guys are old farts like us now,
Yeah. The extra class license it's actually quite a difficult test. It requires knowing some advanced theory of electronics and RF electronics. And, usually that's the kind of stuff you get in first year college if you're going, pursuing an electrical engineering degree. So I was proud of that accomplishment. I've had that license. They've now streamlined things, but it is still the highest class of amateur radio license that they offer.
And so you were the youngest of many, certainly one of the youngest of many that ever got that license. And I remember people commenting on it, how, 16, he's got that. So pretty cool. So I also remember a monster mini bike from like the Mad Max movies, built by hanging like a lawnmower engine on the crossbar of a bicycle. Talk about that. And I say that because you were always into building and creating things.
Boy, I haven't thought about that for 30 years, but I remember it was a red bicycle, and this was a horizontal shaft, Briggs and Stratton, and it had a little clutch on it. And I basically tied the thing up with ropes and chains so that the clutch would drive the tire directly,
and it did.
It did until the tire, lost all of its rubber and burned out. But that was a lot of fun. I didn't even remember that. I haven't thought about that for 30 years.
So here's another one: climbing trees to install ham radio antennas.
I still do that.
Actually, I know.
Well, nowadays I rent the lift. I have a 50-foot tower at home in Florida, and I rent the lift to get up there. But yeah, I mean, so far I've never broken my leg falling out of a tree. And actually, in Florida, I built this. We used to call them potato launchers as we were teenagers. It's a big piece of PVC tubing, that you fill up with air, and then you put I use an egg sinker, a 1-ounce egg sinker tied to a fishing pole. And once I let it off, the thing will shoot 100 feet into the air. One time I tried to do that and it broke, and it put a hole through the screen enclosure that covers my pool. And that hole was there for years until a hurricane destroyed it.
But that puts the wire up in the tree where you need it to be.
Yeah. It'll shoot up 70, 80 feet. Yeah.
Talk about, so when you were young, right after high school, as I recall, you joined the Army. You were in Germany, and that's where you further developed your knowledge of and interest in electronics and technology. Talk about that experience.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't say this to everybody, but that was the 3 best years of my life. I met a lot of people and had a lot of fun, and it changed me as a person. But yeah, so I wasn't quite ready for college for a number of reasons. And so I decided at 17, I joined the Army. Mom had to actually sign on the dotted line for permission. And I tested really high, of course, in the electronics, in the ASVABs, and they offered me basically my choice of schools. And I took a school that was only one of its kind in Denver. It was called, the Army calls it calibration specialist, and the Air Force calls it PMEL, Precision Measurement Equipment Labs. And basically what we were trained to maintain very complex test equipment like oscilloscopes and signal generators and spectrum analyzers and voltmeters, and go around to different bases and certify that their boxes were making measurements that were traceable back to what was then called the National Bureau of Standards. It's now called NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology. We were calibration specialists. So we could open up a tectonics oscilloscope and troubleshoot it to the bad transistor and fix it and put this sticker on it that says, this is now, when you measure a volt or an ohm or a frequency, it's traceable back to our national standards. And the coolest thing about that as experience is it was mobile. Our labs were mobile. So we got to travel in this big loop every 6 or 8 weeks and stay in hotels and eat in restaurants. And basically we were immersed in German society. We didn't have to do the regular army thing, I mean, it was just such a fun time.
So I think I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Were you in uniform?
Yeah, we were
You're
in
still
uniform.
in uniform. Okay.
But I never saw a gun, right?
Yeah.
And twice a year, the command, it was called USAREUR at the time, U.S. Army Europe, they would call these alerts where all the soldiers would get on their backpacks and get their, rifles and their weapons and their grenades and whatever, and go out in the field, set up tents and pretend and play war games. Well, we would go to the motor pool and grab a van and head out of town. we didn't have to play those games, which was kind of, we always used to joke we weren't regular army. We were we were treated as such too.
So that further fueled your passion for technology, right? So now let's fast forward just a little bit. You get out of the Army. Your first, it looks to me, your first professional job. My memory's good, but it's not that good. It was your career, not mine.
Neither was mine.
Raycom, your first professional position. And I just want to know, describe the work and how you got that job. I think it's relevant.
Yeah. So Raycom was actually in Colorado. So my first job, probably not on my resume, probably not on my LinkedIn because the company's long gone. It's probably irrelevant. But I ended up in Seattle, the story of itself. And I found a job at a company that was called Northern Radio Company. It was a small 30 or 40 people operation, and they manufactured shipboard radios for commercial shipping ships, right? And I was very, I signed on as a technician to test the boards as they would come off the assembly line. And small story, that is where I met the mother of my children. She was one of the assemblers, but I quickly gained the admiration of the engineering staff, and they were good enough to mentor me and teach me. And that's where I began to learn about microprocessors and computer hardware and computer software, because these radios had, for its day, this was 1981. So for its day, these had a synthesized RF generator. So you could basically plug in any frequency, right? Any frequency you want. And it was a microprocessor controlled synthesizer. And so that's where I kind of got my start in the, sort of microprocessor and computer technologies, both the hardware and the software side of it. It was an interesting job.
So you've actually spent a lot of time on the hardware side of things. I know after a while it was software and development, but you were also at kind of a particular time in I know this is going to sound kind of preachy and whatever, not preachy, but I don't know, romantic, but you were at a time when a lot of stuff was being developed, including very important pieces of equipment that made networking possible. Talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. So in the days, I can make a hardware engineer laugh his head off right now when I tell him the technology that I worked on. I used to develop boards and products that had these programmable chips on them, and the programmable chips had 24 logic blocks. It doesn't matter what that means. Today's programmable chips have 24,000. You can build an entire microprocessor and an entire Wi-Fi router on a chip, and it has hundreds of thousands of these logic elements. And I was working on the very beginnings of that technology that had just a few, and we'd use them for state machines and for driving little bits and pieces of hardware. I remember, so fast forward to Raycom Systems, that was the first time I ever had an email address. It was before, I want to say it was before Windows 3. That was like
before Al Gore invented the internet.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I might have had a DARPA internet address for a brief period of time. During that period. We were working on a DARPA program at that time. But but yeah, that was like nobody had emails. There was no such thing as the World Wide Web and a browser in those days, and the PCs were just coming online as a technology. So I've kind of lived through that whole, and that's fascinating too. That whole technical, revolution. I mean, 100 years ago, it was the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
This last 60, 40, 60 years has been the technological revolution. And it continues, right? Now we're moving into Industry 4.0 and digitization of every process under the sun. And, it's been amazing to be a part of that and to watch that evolve. And I can't imagine where it's going.
Well, hold that thought. We're going to come back to that. We're going to take our first commercial. We'll be back in about 60 seconds with Chris Hallinan.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back again with, and it is a treat, my brother Chris Hallinan. Very professional, very accomplished. Chris, this is a big question. You can take it any direction you want. What are some of the most important lessons? I don't mean technologically. I mean in terms of business and experience and getting jobs, leaving jobs, whatever you want, but more from a business case during those early years. Most important lessons learned.
Well, let's focus it. I'll answer the question this way first. Is career development, right? So, I'll just say it publicly. I never completed a college degree, and I had to work a little bit harder. I spent many years doing night school with a family of two that grew, two kids that grew to a family of four, which is six of us, right? Took all the core courses for engineering and physics and calculus and electronics and all that. But I never actually finished the degree. I just ran out of steam doing it at night, and family demands just became too great. But one thing that I have learned over the course of my career is that if you really want to advance your career and move forward, you need to limit your time at every company. So I think the longest stint I've ever done at any one company was 6 years, and that's pretty much by design. In fact, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it's 6 years here, 6 years here, 6 years here. Right. You learn, you become accomplished, you succeed. And then the best way to advance, to get more responsibility and of course more salary that comes with it, more compensation, you need to be prepared to move to a new job. And a lot of people hate change, and in my life I've gone through a lot of changes, and I don't hate change. I look at change as a unique opportunity for a new chapter, right? It's like I don't have the fear of the unknown. Sure, I have trepidations of the unknown, but I've done that over the course of my career, and it has paid off. I'm in the latter stages of my career now. In fact, I'm looking forward a couple of years to that big R word, and starting to put things in place for that. But that's something I've done, and I've done kind of intentionally. I've been lucky. I've never been in a layoff situation. I've always been I've always done it on my own terms. And that's just pure luck. I mean, there's a lot of people that get in situations where they can't control, but that's something that I would encourage, and I do, there's a few people in my company that are young and kind of early in their career, and I encourage them, not, hey, don't leave the company, but if you
Yeah.
really want to, advance your career, spend a few years here, learn whatever you can, and then move on and learn some new things and new challenges. So that's just the way I've looked at it.
Cool. So you were also self-employed, sort of overlapping some of that, and that's twice. The first one I see is 2000 to 2007, and again, that's probably some consulting, et cetera. Talk about that. What made you decide to do that, and what kind of work did you do?
Well, what made me decide to do that, I probably won't
Mm.
talk about. I got into a job that I wasn't really satisfied with, and I
Mhm.
said, you know what? I would like to try in my career self-employment. So in the old proverbial, line, I quit my job and hung up a sign that says engineer for hire. And
Yeah.
that was in the dot-com boom. And I
Mhm.
named the company, it was a Massachusetts corporation. I named it DS4.com. At the time, telecommunications was one of the big industries. And at the time, a DS3, which happens to be this technical designation for a high-speed connection, by
Mhm.
today's standards, it would be ancient. And so I figured the next big technology would be DS4. So I named my company DS4.com. And basically, what I did was I helped companies to build small we call them embedded systems. What's an embedded system? Um, it's a small, often resource constrained device that often has a single purpose. Um, a good example would be a GPS unit.
Mhm.
Like, remember in the day when you could buy individual GPSs for your car?
Yeah.
Now we don't need them because they're either built
Got
into the
it.
car or built into our phone.
Mm.
But that's a perfect example of an embedded system. So I'd helped companies. Uh, I had a broad expertise in a wide range of technologies, from the bottom of these systems, the hardware, to the full stack of software that runs on them, and the know-how to put all that together in a small form factor. So I was getting paid good money back then
Mm.
for doing that job, and yeah.
What was the hardest part of that consulting and being self-employed?
Well, the hardest part is you work a lot more than 40 hours a week, because
Mm.
first of all, your clients think you know everything. And so
Mhm.
you have to
Well, we do.
pretty much, yeah, we do. I do. I can almost say that now. No, I would never say that. In fact, the more I learn, the more I know how
Yeah.
much I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're doing a lot of work to discover and learn and research, the methods that you need to make the solution. And the other thing is you have to be a marketer. You have to be,
Right.
if this
Right.
devote a certain time of your week to find clients, because that's what keeps the bills paid.
Mhm.
Ideally, you have a backlog, you have clients waiting for your time as free up. And mostly I was successful through my network, around, the area here in finding clients and
What
staying
was the
busy.
most Yeah, for sure. What was the most rewarding part?
I'll be honest with you, that was a very good pay.
Mm.
It was tough work, but it
Mm.
was top dollar.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of money in those years. And I met a lot of people. I even around this area, or if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I probably have 5,000 people in my network. And I'll bet you I've met a pretty substantial proportion of those people, or
Mm.
some of them I haven't, but I was connected to the local Motorola office here, which is no longer called Motorola. It's gone through two different name changes since I was working with those guys. They make chips, microprocessor chips, for one thing, and just a lot of different groups in the area, the different
Mm.
distributors and the people who sold these chips. You know, just I knew a lot of people, and that helped me to keep the jobs coming in.
All right, then you started to move over to software and development, Monta Vista, Mentor Graphics, and then you also moved over to what we like to call the dark side, the
Yeah,
sales side. Now, you were a technical resource in sales, but talk about making that transition. Was it intentional, accidental? Talk about that.
purely accidental. As a matter of fact, I mentioned this Motorola office
Mm.
here. I don't know what their status is today. It's been quite a few years. They're in Woburn, and if they're still there, it's a company called NXP. And I knew a lot of
Mhm.
the people, the salespeople there, and the FAEs. And the FAE there actually introduced me to someone at Monte Vista, knowing that they were looking for an FAE at Monte Vista who was really had a deep knowledge in embedded Linux and all things Linux. And I met the vice president of sales, and he made me an offer. And I ended up spending 6 years there, and that was a good run. I really enjoyed that. It was a startup. In fact, Monte Vista Linux was founded in 1999. They were bought out by a semiconductor vendor. They're still around under that name, but totally different company now. But they were essentially a pioneer in commercializing embedded Linux for, now I'm going to get technical, for non-x86 architectures. What's x86 architecture? The computer you're sitting in front of right now, if it runs Windows, it's got an Intel x86 chip on it. And x86 is a microprocessor architecture. But there are other architectures, most notably ARM. And I should remember what that stands for, but I don't. But ARM has just taken over the world in high performance, low power computing. So they're the king of, like, every router you buy, a lot of routers you buy are going to have I would say most, at Best Buy, for example, they're going to have ARM chips in them, not x86 chips. So Monte Vista was a pioneer in commercializing embedded Linux solutions for non-x86 architectures. So that's what they did. And we were around for 10 years. We never hit it out of the ballpark, so to speak, as a company. It was very early days in the embedded Linux business, but it was a great run. I've got lifelong friends from that engagement. So in fact, I was just out in Austin a few weeks ago and had dinner with one of them. So
we're going to come back to what Linux is, but for now, my computer runs M1. Just don't tell anybody. All right.
Oh, so mine's an M2. I love it.
So an FAE, you were in the sales side of the house. So you were customer.
I was a commissioned. Yeah, I was customer facing, commissioned. I supported a sales account manager essentially. So we would be.
So he or she was doing the sales,
the business.
Closing business, getting in front of people. You would come out as a technical resource and
my job is simple.
Get a technical win.
Get the technical win. You said the words right. You took the words right out of my mouth. That was my job. Get the technical win. Yeah.
So there are another couple of companies there, and then some more self-employment, which is going on. Before we take the next break, which will be about 2 minutes, you're currently at a company called Canonical, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are.
Talk about the work that you do now.
So I joined about a year ago. I am the director of IoT sales, as you mentioned when you on that great introduction you made at the start of the show. And I basically sell one of the world's most popular embedded Linux operating systems that's specifically optimized for the IoT market. And unless you were born, unless you live under a rock, you probably have heard the term IoT, Internet of Things, right? I mean, there are so many things in our daily lives that are example of IoT, Ring doorbells and devices like that are ubiquitously connected, always connected to the internet. Those are Internet of Things devices. And the coolest thing about this job is because Canonical as a company is not so well known, but our product, which is called Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ubuntu Linux, is probably the most popular Linux on the planet. And I get to talk to companies that are household names, people that you have in companies whose appliances you have in your kitchen, whose technology you have in your automobile, whose technology are in airplanes and farm equipment and retail restaurant chains and you name it. I don't want to go and talk about proprietary things, but everyday customers, whose household names, and it's really cool to be involved with those companies, right?
All right, we're going to take our second break now, and we'll come back and talk about IoT. And you've kicked this around, embedded Linux, what Linux is. We'll come back in just about another 60 seconds. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Hey, this is Elliot Lewis of Hall & Oates, and you're listening to W4CY Radio.
What I want, you've got, and it might be hard to handle.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind: to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with Chris Hallinan, Director of IoT Sales, accomplished author, speaker, instructor, and pilot, and he's my brother from the same mother. Talk about, I don't get to say that a lot. Talk about, define for the audience, a non-technical business audience, what embedded Linux is.
Perfect. I'll start with Linux itself.
Yep.
Because embedded is just a special case. But
Okay.
Linux is an operating system. It does the exact same functions as Windows 10, for example, right? Or Windows 11, or whatever you happen to be using,
Or
Windows
iOS.
XP. Yeah. iOS is an operating system. The thing about Linux is that it is what we call open source. Now, what is open source? The best way I can describe it is tell you what it's not. Microsoft produces a number of really nice packages, software packages. Windows 11 is their latest operating system. They produce Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel, etc. Those are what we call closed source software programs or proprietary software programs. You cannot look at the source code that makes those up. They're controlled solely by Microsoft. In contrast, open source projects like Linux operating system are controlled by no one in a commercial sense. There's no company that owns the rights or controls the destiny for open source software. And it's a fascinating movement. Gosh, I wish I could remember the book. I will in a minute. It's a fascinating movement, and it started, 30 some odd years ago, 25 some odd years ago. And it has grown immensely. Most every company on the planet is using some sort of type of open source. And open source is freely downloadable. You don't have to pay for it. You can modify it for your own use. You can redistribute it if you want to. You can look at the source code. It's developed by a community of like-minded people that could be and usually are spread all around the world. Mm-hmm. So now let's talk about Linux and specifically what Linux is. Linux just happened to, through a bunch of circumstances that went the right way, become the most popular operating system outside of the Microsoft Windows world. And you got everyone that can hear my voice has touched Linux in some way. For example, Linux is the operating system that powers the World Wide Web. Okay, who uses Linux? Google is a Linux house when you interface with Google. Twitter, Facebook, Amazon. We'll get back to Amazon. It's a special case. IBM, McDonald's, NASA, Netflix. Right. Those are just ones that come off the top of my head. Every automobile you step into, modern automobile today, has got Linux under the hood. It's everywhere. It's in your home routers. It's in your coffee makers. It's in your, go into Best Buy and half the products in there, 3/4 of them are going to be running some version of Linux. So It has become immensely popular, partly because it's decentralized and companies, are not beholden to any other company for its future and its, support, etc. And it just it's taken over the world. And embedded Linux is simply an application of Linux that's usually a little bit smaller and runs on resource constrained devices, often devices which have no human interface or very minimal ones like the interface on your microwave oven, right?
Yeah.
No keyboard and screen in the traditional sense of the word. And I wish I could remember the book. It'll come to me. But yeah, open source is a movement, and Linux is probably the most visible and most popular products to be produced by this open source software movement.
So, work product that's written in Linux, can it be copywritten? Can it be proprietarily protected?
Linux cannot.
Right.
Linux has been licensed by what we call a viral license. And by viral license, Linux is copyrighted, but there are probably 10,000 or more copyright holders.
Yeah.
But it's copyrighted under a very specific license that happened to be designed here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And that license is viral. It says that if you distribute this software, it must be distributed with this license, and therefore the downstream users of it are bound to the conditions of that license. And it's what we call a copyleft license. That means it gives the user the freedom to have it, to modify it, to examine it, to change it, to redistribute it. So it's a viral license. So no, there's no possibility that anyone could take Linux. They would have to convince, thousands and thousands and thousands of copyright holders to change it, and that would never be even physically possible.
But the code in the keypad of my microwave, that process, is that copyrightable?
So that's a good question, and I am not a lawyer, but I do know a little bit about copyright. A particular arrangement of things can be copyrighted, right? Like art, like a poem, like a book, like a song. And it's very likely that an arrangement of software and hardware bits inside of a microwave could be copyrighted. But copyright does not necessarily imply proprietary. It often does, but there are plenty of copyrights, like the Creative Commons is a very, very, you'll see that all over Wikipedia is Creative Commons copyright.
Yep.
And it's a permissive copyright license. So.
All right. You mentioned Amazon as a unique case.
Thank you. Yeah. So Amazon started out life as a couple of servers, in a garage somewhere selling books.
Right.
And those servers were running Linux. And as the business grew, and it was successful for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is the timing was right. The World Wide Web was becoming a big thing, and people had access, and they could get online and order a book. I remember, I think one of the first years, I spent a ton of money on books as part of my consultancy at the time. And at the end of the year, they sent me this tumbler, this Amazon tumbler, right? Because I was such a great customer. Imagine that. I spent a measly $3,000 on books and literature in 1 year, and they sent me a tumbler. That ain't gonna happen today. As the business grew, they grew from like 2 computers running this service to 200 computers running this service to 2,000 computers running this service, all running Linux, to 20,000 computers running this service. And God only knows, God and Amazon, what the final number, what they run today. They have multiple data centers around the world, but essentially Amazon is a company that's run on this giant worldwide, world-class cluster of Linux PCs, of ordinary PCs running Linux. And what a lot of people don't know is one of the bigger revenue contributions that Amazon has every year is they actually have what we call a cloud service. So you can, what's a good example? Twitter runs as a cloud service. So all of the data and the interaction from the user is managed on a remote computer somewhere out in the cloud. They call it the cloud. And Amazon, having these 20,000 or 100,000, whatever the number is, computers, they had a lot of spare computing capacity. So they decided to take that spare computing capacity, and they created essentially the public cloud business. with this spare computing capacity, and they were renting out computer capacity. I used it once. I was in Monte Vista and I had to go overseas to make a training course, and I actually put together a package so that each of the people in the class could use an Amazon compute cloud, because it required a lot of compute power to run this little class I was running, and I couldn't count on the fact that they'd come with laptops that could run it. So I actually used, configured 24 of these Amazon compute systems, and the class would log into those and do all their work there. So they rent not only storage, but compute resources, compute time. And the business has grown to this just enormous, they have dozens and dozens and dozens of services. I have lost track on what they sell, but
And a zillion resellers of it as well.
Yeah. And all running on spare capacity on these giant farms of ordinary PCs running Linux operating system. So,
all right. So last couple of questions. You're on the advisory board of the Yukto project. Yeah. And that's a give back. What is that?
Yeah.
Give back. That's something you do to support that community.
Yes. I was employed for a company called Mentor Graphics, and I kind of inherited the role. But yeah. So the Yocto project, Yocto is some kind of atomic particle, or I don't even really know what it means. But the project is an open source project that helps people build Linux operating systems for their specific gadget, right? Whatever that gadget might be, whether it's a Wi-Fi router or a Ring doorbell or any of a million other things, right? A printer, a 3D printer. I'm working with one company that's making a lobster cutting machine. They're in Canada. Really? They cut the claws before you get to eat it. Yocto helps people build Linux if they want to do it themselves. And Yocto also was adopted by all the major chip vendors. Intel was one of the founding members. They put a lot of money into the Yocto project. NXP Semiconductor, which used to be Motorola and then was Freescale and now is NXP, and others, the ARM ecosystem, have contributed to the Yocto project. But it is a community-driven project that helps make it easier for people with not a lot of resources to build a demonstration, prototype, proof of concept gadget with a Linux operating system running on it.
All right, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about your other passion. We talked a little bit about music. You're better than you say you are, but every time we get together as a family, you and your boys have guitars and, always entertaining everybody, and we all sing along. But you're a pilot. How did you get into flying? And I've got a couple other questions I think the audience will appreciate, but how did you get into flying originally?
Okay. So I like to, one of my favorite jokes is, in a cocktail party full of 50 people, how do you know who the pilots are in the room? They're going to tell you. So pilots are that way. Pilots are that way. No, this is really true. I was on a business trip. I was in Atlanta. It was late at night. I was watching TV, which is something I haven't done in years and years and years. And up comes this ad, 1-800-I-CAN-FLY. And I called. I was bored. Called. 1990. Didn't think anything of it. 2.5 months later, I get a letter from, believe it or not, Spencer Airport, which is just 5 miles west of Worcester, Massachusetts. Little old Spencer. And with an invitation to come down and take a $25 introductory ride. So I did that. And I met this gentleman who is someone who I admire as a person and as a flight instructor to this day. His name is Ed Urbanowski, and he still works in the business. And he took me up for my first ride. And I couldn't get the grin off my face. So I said, okay, we're going to figure out how to do this. I've got a family of 6 and I was making okay money in those days, but nothing, I wasn't knocking it out of the ballpark. But so I signed up for lessons, and 1.5 years later, I became a private pilot. And over that time, I have owned 4 different airplanes. I've kind of moved up the pecking order, if you will, in airplanes. And anyone that knows aviation appreciates that the airplane I own today, the Beechcraft Bonanza, is kind of the king of the single engine family of airplanes.
Hmm.
It's retractable gear, high performance, 300 horsepower, go fast, go high type of an airplane. So it's the top of the tier before you would move, say, to a twin engine propeller driven
Hmm.
plane. And it's been a big part of my life. It's a big part of my social life. Many of my friends are pilots or have been pilots. As part of that, I've also lost a couple of good friends, one of whom is the owner of that Spencer Airport. Um, but yeah, it's been a big part of my life, and it's a passion that I will always have.
And you're in the middle of a project. You're building a Vans RV-14A. People that
Uh,
know airplanes will know what that is, but
the dirty
uh,
little secret. So I have the project in my
mhm,
workshop. I think I
mhm,
bought it in August at the Oshkosh EAA fly-in in Oshkosh, Wisconsin every year, which just happened a couple weeks ago this year.
mhm,
Um, and yes, I bought a partial kit. They call it the empennage kit, and I began to work on it. And I didn't own a plane at the time. And I spent, many weekends and evenings in my shop putting it together. So I have the horizontal stabilizer, the vertical stabilizer, the rudder, and I got the elevator mostly put together. And then I did something really stupid. I went out and bought this Bonanza, and I haven't done any work on it since. So I don't know that I will continue. It's a decision I
yeah.
haven't made yet. I may sell it. I may
Yeah, it's
continue
probably
it.
valuable to sell. Somebody would buy that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It most certainly has value, but yeah, just to be fair to the audience, especially to the audience that may be builders, I'm not a builder. I can't put that label on mine. I can't wear that hat, the T-shirt.
Oh, that's fair. So, a couple last questions. Who in the listening and viewing audiences should reach out to you and why?
Thank you. Appreciate that opportunity. If you are a developer building products for this vast world of Internet of Things, right? Which so um, and I'll comment on what that means in a minute. Um, and you're looking for a super secure solution with over-the-air firmware updates and uh, ready built off-the-shelf operating system for that environment. We there's no competition for what our product called Ubuntu Core. But let me explain what people are doing today. This whole IoT thing. There's this I mentioned at the very early part of our conscious of the time. There's this trend to digitize everything, and another buzzword called Industry 4.0. And these industries are now putting in these processes, these measurement devices, like retail chains, the ones you know and love, the fast food restaurants
Hmm.
and restaurants. They're putting in these computers to measure every single measurable thing about that operation, and then sending all that data up into the cloud. And then data scientists are crunching all that data to figure out how to make their processes more efficient, how to improve profits. And that is across every industry. Okay. And the other thing that's hitting really big is artificial intelligence, machine learning. And I'm not
Hmm.
afraid of AI like others might be.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it's already in our lives, right? I mean, AI is going to be just an amazing technology for a lot of different things. If you've played with Chat GPT, if you haven't played with Chat GPT, Google it and give it a try. It'll write a song for you, a poem, and do a lot of other things. But that's what's driving. So if you're involved in that Industry 4.0 and digitization of your processes and your factories, your stores, your restaurants, that's where we play. We're an enabler of that technology.
Last question. How do people best reach out to you?
Well, good question. So LinkedIn is probably the best bet for publicly. If you just search for if you just search for Christopher Hallinan and throw the word Linux in there, I'm probably the first hit, and you'll probably find my LinkedIn profile. And
Perfect.
I accept virtually every connection, mostly, uh, and that's probably the best way to reach me from a public point of view. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been fun for me. Hope it's been good for you. I really appreciate you taking the time. And
Well, it's
I
been
enjoyed
fun
it.
for me too. I was a little nervous when you first asked me to do this. What do I know? But I guess I do know a few things. I'm old enough to know a few things. Old enough
Well,
to
I learned.
forget a few things. But thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, of course. Thanks for being here. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. This is a show about business and business challenges. Often, if you've got concerns about the growth of your company, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Winning Business Radio. You can drop me a note. Kevin@winningbusinessradio.com is one of my several email addresses. Our company is Winning Incorporated. We're part of Sandler Training. We say we develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. We're not right for everybody, but maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you, as always, every single week to producer and engineer Juan. Thank you, Juan, for another job well done. Be sure to join us next week. That'll be Monday, August 14th, for another fun and interesting guest. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.